Hi guys. All right, before we even get into the intro, I feel like we need to address the brow situation stat. I just feel like my video is going to come on and it's going to be like brows. If you already follow me on Instagram, you might have seen that I was getting my eyebrows done yesterday. I was getting them done by the queen of brows, Twee, over at Brow Nude. Side note, if you guys are in Edmonton and you haven't gone to see her, go. If you're not in Edmonton, it's worth the travel. Either her or Starly, phenomenal artists. But true to Sherrilyn form, I had a little issue where my skin just went snap show on me and turned beet red and swelled up. It pretty much never happens, hardly ever, but of course it happened to me. It's gone down quite a bit now. Now they're just in that dark phase, and then they're going to soften and flake off, and then I'm not gonna have to worry about them anymore. So all is good in the world, but I just figured if you guys were like, whoa, what's going on there? That's why. All right. Now that that's out of the way, hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn, and I'm so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back to our True Crime Wine Wednesday. Hey, if you like true crime, like sipping the wine and hanging out with all your friends, then you definitely should join us. Hit that subscribe button, come and hang out with us every Wednesday. And you don't need to like wine. We have people who are just starting their day right now across the world, drinking a cup of coffee. I know some people hang out with us while they're working, while they're cleaning their house, while they're waiting for their babies to wake up for their naps. Whatever it is, we just love having you here. Today I am drinking wine. I'm going to be drinking this Apothic Rosé. I've been on this blush kick lately, and if you guys know from some of my previous videos, I'm really loving the Spade and Sparrow one. Still working on the manifestation of that collab. But right now, it's sold out everywhere. So this actually is pretty good. It's nice and dry, like a dry wine. It's definitely doing the trick until I can get my hands back on my Spade and Sparrow. All right, cheers, my loves. Let's get right into it. Yep, good stuff, good stuff. All right, the setting of the story could literally be like the premise of a soap opera. So many characters, scandals, affairs, illegal drug rings, suicide, murder, question marks all around, seedy characters. It's just literally, it should be a soap opera, but it's real life. It happened in Sevierville, Tennessee. Am I saying it? Sevierville? It's the home of Dolly Parton. It sounds very cute and touristy. It's got a lot of antique shops. As I was reading it, I was like, my mom would actually really love to go here. Just do the boutique shopping. It sounds like it's a very wholesome town. People got super dressed up with not gowns, let's not be dramatic. Nice dresses, gloved hands for, Sunday at church. For a long time, they actually didn't even have liquor stores or bars, so definitely wouldn't fit in. And this is also where you would find the Great Smoky National Park. And it was on Great Smoky Mountain on November 6, 1994, that a man named Kelly Lavera's body was found in his Jeep, and it appeared like he had gone off the side of the mountain and crashed into a tree. First glance, it looks like it was just a tragic accident and he might have just lost control of his vehicle, but when investigators got there and saw inside, Kelly wasn't even in the front seat. He was actually in the back of the Jeep. So right away, red flags were kind of going off. To figure out what had happened, investigators had to untangle this really scandalous web that had two very well-known families, the Rays and the Mills, pointing fingers at each other's family for being responsible for Kelly's death, kind of like a modern-day Montague Capulet situation. Hang on, because there's a lot of characters to go through. You might want to take some notes. No, don't do that, because that's not as fun. Just chill out. We'll start with a man named Brent Mills. It's also really weird for me to say Brent and not Big Guy, because I just call my husband Big Guy and his name's Brent. And I just kept reading this book wanting to call him Big Guy. This has nothing to do with the case. He was the son of parents William and Tippy Mills, and he grew up in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. They sound like really doting parents. They adored Brent. They were a very well-off family, so they could give him all of the things that he wanted in life and spoil him because they had the money to do it. Gatlinburg is described as this kind of like a ritzy area, almost like a Hampton up higher on the mountain. And then you've got an area called Pigeon Forge, and then Sevierville below it, so those are the peasants. Not really, but that's how it's described. It's more higher class of that area. Brent's family founded the first national bank in Gatlinburg, and his father also served as mayor. When Brent got older, he started taking on more responsibilities in the family and working with his dad at the bank. I'm sure his dad dreamed of, his son taking the reins and enjoying it as much as he did. His dad was like very much your quintessential bank president, crisp suit all the time, tight tie, loved working with numbers all the time, was like firm but fair in loans. He ran the business just very matter of fact and with a strict regimen. Brent was a lot easier going. He was not really a fan of like number crunching all day and being in like a stuffy office with like an uncomfortable suit. He was like the really friendly guy who just wanted to get along with everybody, schmooze all day. He'd much rather just like go out and golf with his buddies or like try to like form business relationships on the golf course like over beer instead of being in the bank. Not only was he known for who his family was, but he's also known as being, one of the most eligible bachelors in the town. And when a newcomer to town who's striving for that like trophy wife status hears about him, she is just laser focused on an introduction. Her name was Sandra Good, and she was a newly divorced single mom to a daughter named Alicia Shane Good. Sandra and Alicia's father, who was a man named Jerry Good, had been raising Alicia, who would become known as Shane. She was always referred to by her middle name. They were raising her in Johnson City. They were said to be a very good-looking couple. Jerry was more passive, easygoing. Sandra was described as more outgoing, seized the day, grabbed the bulls by the horns. I was going to say balls. Is that a term as well? What's the ball one? Bulls' balls? She wanted to mingle with the upper class, which was hard because they weren't well off. And Jerry was okay with that. Like, he was fine with the simple things in life, but Sandra wasn't. Eventually, she just got frustrated with it. She saw that he was just not willing to put in more to make more. So she leaves him and she takes Shane with her to Gatlinburg. And no denying it was for intention of, rubbing elbows with the ritzy, the people with money, honey. When she arrives, she quickly gets this job at a hotel. The hotel owner's really chatty with her. He would brag about knowing like very wealthy people in the area. Maybe it was to like name drop and impress her and hope that she would be maybe interested in him. I don't know. If that was the plan, it definitely backfired on him because he starts talking about his very good friend Brent, who is the mayor's son and a very big deal at the only bank in town, which his family happened to own. So she's literally seeing like dollar signs just like floating around him in her eyes as she's just like taking it all in. And she's like, I gotta meet him. So a few weeks later, she gets an introduction. And after their first meeting, that was it. She just up and took the most eligible bachelor in town and married him in 1973 off the market. This was a marriage she was obviously thrilled about. She saw it as her marrying up in life. But for Brent's family, they saw it the opposite. They definitely thought that he could do better. Sandra was very beautiful, but she came with, I guess, like baggage in their eyes by having a daughter, and she wasn't from like a well-to-do family. They just thought like they weren't well suited for each other, which is no skin off Sandra's back because within a few years, Brent raises up the ranks at the bank when his dad gets sick, and now he becomes the president. So she's like Mrs. President. This time, they also have another baby to add to their family, another little girl, and they name her Kim. When he took over the bank, though, things changed. It went from kind of like this mom and pop style bank where it was just like more homey and friendly and everybody knew each other, more on like a smaller scale, to this like big high risk lending investing corporation cog. And Brent was making deals with everybody more like he was just their buddy. Maybe like he just didn't want to let them down. So a lot of the deals were also just formed at the golf course with his buddies. They'd have like an idea that was going to be like really good. And he'd be like, yeah, sure. Obviously with this laissez-faire attitude, he's a con man's dream. And in the late 70s, he meets a man named John Rupel who comes and moves into Gatlinburg with this like mysterious aura to him. He's this very wealthy character, but nobody knows like where he came from or how he got his money. He's clearly got it though, because he comes in and he buys this 12-bedroom mansion. It was situated on like the top of the mountain, almost like a flashy Dracula. No one could figure out John. Every time somebody would try to nonchalantly like pry to see where he got his success from, he would just like casually be like, oh, business has been really good, and then just lay down like a big fat brick of cash to like pay for something. And no one really questioned him because he was also handing out money to people around town that needed it. He was helping fund some projects with the police station. And you know, when you're doing that and you give a nonchalant answer like, oh yeah, business has been good, people are just like, okay, cool. After John's arrival, a man named John Whittier comes. Not John. John was John. This guy's name is Jerry. And he's the next to cause some buzz. And he's not as tight-lipped as John. Now I'm getting confused. John and Jerry, like I'm confusing myself. Jerry's not as tight-lipped as John is. And he tells people that ask, like, you know, what his past is, that he came from Florida and that he was running away from some Cubans that he had done some shady business dealings with, and he essentially had like a hit on him. And then not long after Jerry arrives, he has a friend join him, and this guy's name is Les Collins. After they get all settled in, they go to the bank and they say that they want to start a business and need a loan for it. The plan was to start a restaurant called Country Pickins Restaurant, which sounds adorable and like it should totally fit in this town. You know, I can imagine like home style chicken, maybe some meat pies. But it was actually going to be a seafood restaurant, which was odd because they were in the middle of Tennessee, not on brand at all, and probably not like the most profitable opportunity for a bank to lend money towards. No one can be sure how that conversation went and how they were able to convince the bank that this was going to be a good idea, but they end up getting it. And I think it's just fair to believe that they were just really good at what they were doing, because the only thing that we really do know about Jerry and Les is that they were imposters. Les Collins' real name was Les Kagler? Ew. And Jerry Whittier's real name was Gerald Hemp. Gerald was one of those cons who would like take on just like the most outlandish identities. He'd be like, oh yeah, I'm a CIA operative. Right down to like a really, really wealthy oil field tycoon. The truth is though, is that they were in the drug trade. And they were part of this big organization that would bring in drugs from Colombia. And they were working with super mysterious, elusive John. And they just did a number to Gatlinburg. When they got there, they turned the town from one that would like illegally dabble in like moonshine here and there to one that was completely dependent on the booga sugar. One of the residents that gets hooked on this is the vice president of the bank. He's a guy named Dwayne Austin. In terms of his role for the bank, he was definitely like the guy for the job. He's explained as kind of like the balance that the bank needed. Remember, Brent just had like no interest in being stuffy and like a banker, and Dwayne really liked that. He came to town from Boston where he was working in another really high-end position at a bank out there, but he was let go because he got caught embezzling. We can assume that Brent didn't know about his past because he was happy to just like give him more and more of the responsibilities that he was not interested in. Dwayne started as a business development officer, and then he quickly just raised the ranks as Brent's right-hand guy. Having him in that role definitely allowed Brent to step back from the bank and, you know, book more tea times, host more parties at the house, spend time with his family. So I'm sure as much as he thought he knew what was going on there, he didn't really have like a solid every day-to-day grasp. And really, we can only assume what conversation was had between Dwayne and the town imposters to get this loan, which wasn't even the only loan that they did take out. The bank takes on even more of a high risk when these guys decide they want to open up an airport. Really just dipping their toes in all of the sand. If you haven't been watching Good Girls as obsessively as I have been and haven't caught on, it turns out they were using these businesses to wash their money. And also making it easier to bring product in by having their own airport. I really feel like I'm an expert now that I've been watching Good Girls. Side note, gutted that they will not be renewing it. Doesn't even make sense, and I know I'll never get over this one, ever. Anyways. These guys had a huge thing going on. There was like several million being cleaned every year. Like I said, the airport was being used to transfer drugs to make it easier to not be detected, and it was working well for quite a while. But eventually they were tracked by the DEA. I guess one day they show up and it's like 20 minutes after this big shipment just comes in. I read it was like around 600 pounds of the cocoa. And I guess they go into the office and they're like, yeah, we need to go and search the plane. And Les is just like, yeah, sure, go for it. He's pretty much like, there's not really anything that's going to interest you on there, but, you know, go ahead. So as soon as they go to search the plane, he just ups and flees. Basically, you know, like a movie, like as they're finding the jackpot, and then you realize someone dropped the ball here because he's gone. You'd figure, you know, like you're planning this big bust, you know it's the moment. You uncover all the drugs, you look around and you're just like, Bob, what are you doing here? I thought you were supposed to be watching him. And Bob's like, no, I thought you were supposed to be watching them. Point is, no one was watching them and they got away. When people around town find out about this bust, Brent goes to Dwayne and he's like, did we have any involvement in that in terms of like financial backing? And Dwayne just casually tells him, oh, we won't see a loss. I've got it covered. Something like this happening in a town like Gatlinburg is obviously super scandalous and definitely like a meal ticket for newspapers. And one publisher that wrote about it often was a gentleman named Rick Ray. He wasn't a local that was born and raised there. He and his wife Penny Ray were from Ontario, Canada, and they made their way to the Smoky Mountains in around 1980. Even though he wasn't from there, though, he did settle in very quick and almost was seen as one of the locals that had been there all of his life. He was highly respected. Penny fit in great too. She was a former beauty queen. They had 4 kids. They were seen just like as the all-American family who liked to socialize and involve themselves in the community. Kind of like the Mills, but the Mills weren't too like shit hot crazy about the Rays because it was often their family that Rick Ray was dramatizing in the paper. I'm sure there had been a part that Sandra relished in. How many of you are imagining someone slathered in relish after last week's video right now? I would see her like kind of enjoying it, like being like the star of the show in a tabloid. She and Shane had settled in quite comfortably in their new lives. Sandra definitely the trophy wife that she was striving to be. Shane, the, you know, rich, spoiled daughter of the bank president. Shane was said to be a good student. She did well in school, didn't need to try very hard, but she wasn't necessarily like the nicest person. She wasn't someone that a lot of the girls got along with. I'm sure there was like an element of jealousy there because a lot of the guys did, you know, enjoy looking at her, wanted to date her. And she definitely took advantage of that. She would dangle her privilege often to friends or like acquaintances, kind of like making it seem like she was doing a nice thing by giving them a gift or inviting them somewhere like very ritzy. And then when she needed to like cash in on some favor, well, remember that one time that I took you to? I'm like so not even on that level of money that I don't even have like a super ritzy place to give you as an example. And I just smacked my mic. But you know what I mean? Like she would remind them of things that she had done or like gifts that she had given and then be like, you've got to do this for me. On the outside, she appeared very confident and I mean, probably in terms of her looks and the lifestyle that she was living, she was. But when it came to her family, she was really insecure. She felt like her real dad had abandoned her. Brent had always made an effort to raise her as his own, but Shane felt like when Kim was born, he treated her differently. And then when her parents separated when she was 17, she was really uncomfortable of losing status. Maybe she just had some like sixth sense about the situation because around this time, this was like the beginning of the end for the Mills family. Brent still showed great effort of including Shane in everything he did. He never took Kim and did things with her without taking Shane. I kind of got the idea that she had a guard up just because of her insecurities, but she was very aware that he was the only like stable figure in her life and didn't want to burn that bridge. She was at that age where she was stuck between being a teenager but so close to being an adult and wanting that independence. She fought with her mom all the time. She saw her mom as a druggie and a drinker. Things are like this for a bit, and then in 1984, it looks like there's a chance that maybe the family is going to reconcile. Even though Brent and Sandra were still separated, they were spending a lot of time together. They were doing things as a family, occasionally having like a sleepover every now and then. And on May 20th, 1984, that's exactly what they did. They spent the day having a picnic as a family, and then Brent went back to the Mills house that Sandra and the girls were still living in. He fell asleep and woke up around 1 or 2 in the morning, and he was going to head back to his condo. Before he left, he told Sandra he would give her a call back in the morning when he woke up in a few hours. So she goes back to bed, and several hours later when she wakes up, she still hadn't heard from him. She tries giving him a shout and nothing. And for some reason, she just had this gut feeling that he wasn't ghosting her, but that something was wrong. She calls over to the bank. Nobody had seen him yet, which was unusual because usually he would at least pop in or communicate like some capacity. She decides to go to his condo, walks in, heads to the bedroom and finds Brent on his bed with a revolver in his hand and a gunshot in his head. There was no note or anything that she could see, but right away the assumption was that he just couldn't take the pressure of like the shady rumors that were surrounding him in the bank. And so that was the narrative that was just like spun and stuck from there. But like any scandal, there's a lot of people who believe he didn't do this to himself. One story that was going on around town was that the sheriff hadn't even arrived on scene yet and Brent had already been taken away. This was something that really annoyed him. He had actually asked specifically for him to remain where he was, and when he gets there, he's gone. And then he finds out that the captain had also ordered for all of his bedding to be stripped off the bed, and it was being burned out like on the balcony. So when he goes to the responding officer, he's like, what's going on? He's like, yeah, they told us to burn it because Sandra's a hot mess in there and she doesn't want to see the mess anymore. So the sheriff's like poking his head around, doesn't feel comfortable with the fact that he can't see a note. It seems like Sandra was really pushing, saying that if he had done this, he would have left a note or given some indication to his family that this was going to happen. He just wasn't the type to just like abandon them. Then he's even more thrown off when he finds out that Sandra was joined at the condo by Dwayne and another business associate at the bank after she had found Brent. They just say they were there to console Sandra. And then you fast forward a few hours later, investigators go back because Sandra was insisting about this suicide note. Investigators go in, Sandra joins them, so does Dwayne, and lo and behold, Dwayne finds a suicide note closed inside of a Bible. After Brent's family sees this note, they say that it doesn't sound like it was something he would say, but Sandra says that it looks like it's his writing. And that was it. It was just left at that. Since Brent was a big deal in town, it was no surprise that the local paper was running the story, and Rick Ray was catching a lot of heat from the Mills. Specifically Shane, she was not cool with Rick writing about her dad. She said that he was trying to ruin the family's reputation. He was trying to tarnish Brent's name. He didn't care though. He just kept running the stories. And I mean, like, he wasn't wrong. Not long after Brent had died, Dwayne ended up getting charged with money laundering. Surprise, surprise. After Brent's death and Dwayne's arrest, there's no bouncing back for Sandra and the girls. Brent had basically used all of his personal assets and properties to keep the bank afloat. So everything ended up pretty much getting seized, and at the end of the day, they were left with $2,500. Making Shane, Kim, and Sandra now go from this life of, ritzy hoity-toity to taking on all of this embarrassment and debt from the bank. We're going to take a little reverie feeding break here. You are just playing. You give Papa a hard time. I gotta film. Can you say hi to everybody? They haven't seen you for so long. Say hi. Say hello. Look it. Can you smile? You can smile. We're just gonna let Rev hang out. Please don't come for me. She doesn't understand anything. I say that because several people had on the Jodi Arias video that I did, because Oriana was in the video for like 7 minutes at the beginning before we were even getting into the case, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Since they had no more money, Shane had to withdraw from university, which was a huge blow to her because it was something that her and Brent had planned together. He was really proud of her for wanting to go to university after graduating. And like I said, she did do well and she was good in school aside from like her piss poor attitude. She had enough brains to know that it was really important to have an education, and now so more than ever, because she would have to rely on herself to make money. So she looked for a school that she could afford, and in 1984 she found that in Stevens College, which was located in Missouri. Moving somewhere else actually turned out great for her because this was a chance that she could reinvent herself and start fresh, and nobody knew of this like scandal and this dark cloud that plagued the family back in Gatlinburg. I think I just made up the name. Gatlinburg? Her goal in school was to become somebody that was known on television, like a journalist or like a TV anchor. Almost immediately after starting school, she meets a 24-year-old named Kelly Laveris at a pool party that she was at. Bless miss you. Kelly was straight-laced. He was an easygoing guy. He was one of those guys that was really friendly and just liked by everybody who met him. Kelly was born in St. Louis, and he had 2 brothers and a sister. He was a heartbreaker in the sense that, like, girls just loved him, and because he couldn't just, like, date everybody bachelor styles, like, their hearts were broken. But he wasn't, like, arrogant or, like, really cocky about his looks. He played in the marching band in high school. He had really good grades. He was a great swimmer. Just a really well-rounded guy. He also happened to be engaged when he met Shane, which didn't seem to be something that concerned her because within a month of them meeting, he was no longer engaged and living with Shane. It almost seemed like they were searching for stability within each other. At this time, Kelly's family was going through a divorce, and Shane was dealing with everything that had gone on back in town. And having each other as that sort of support, it seemed like it just kind of like amplified things and made it move really fast. Within 6 months of moving in together, they were married. Allegedly, this happened because Shane wanted to take out some loans for school, but since she was in the middle of a falling out with her mom and not talking, she couldn't use her mom as a co-signer, but she was told if she had a spouse, that would work as a co-signer. So they end up just going to get married at the courthouse at noon one afternoon in between classes. She's not eating at all. Look at her, look at you. She's like, sorry. How are we doing in the lip situation? Yeah, we could use a touch up. I am melting under these lights today. Not on my eyebrows though. That's just the brow balm that I've got to put on to keep them nice and moist. Gross. She did end up getting the loan, but it really went very fast and not towards school. It was spent on trivial things like clothes and drinking. It didn't take too long for her grades to plummet, and not long after that, she ends up dropping out of college, getting a serving job, and then shortly after that getting pregnant. Before their baby's even born, they actually got married another 2 times, once on a spontaneous weekend getaway, and another back home when Shane went to go visit her family. Sandra, I guess, wasn't the biggest fan of Kelly. She wanted Shane to marry like she had when she found Brent. She had these plans of like being like the mother-in-law on a yacht, back in that glamorous lifestyle again. She knew with Kelly going to school to be a teacher, there was just no way of her achieving that, which is accurate. After the birth of their son Cooper, and before their second child is even born, they've filed for bankruptcy. Why can't I talk sometimes? Bankruptcy. That was easy to say, not bankruptcy. I guess they had accumulated several other loans, racked up high credit card bills. A lot of it was allegedly done on Shane's behalf because she was trying to maintain that lifestyle that she was used to, but didn't now have the funds to back it up. The debt becomes too much for them and they just can't keep up living the way they are. So in 1992, after the birth of their second child, a little girl named Casey, they decide to move back to around the area that Shane grew up in called Sevierville. This is Dolly Parton's hometown, so this was right up Kelly's alley because he dreamed of living this like rustic country lifestyle. He was really hoping that the family was just going to have this quiet, idyllic countryside life, not high maintenance, just very easygoing. For Shane, she's not as stoked. Although she's moving back to the town where she was like creme de la creme up in Gatlinburg, she wasn't returning as that. They were not making bank, and even though Kelly had a job as a professor at a local college, it just wasn't enough to float the lifestyle that she was accustomed to. They bought an apartment in an area called Frog Alley. I read it was called Frog Alley because it was built like in this marshy area, and the frogs would come every spring and all you could hear was like ribbits. It was so loud that it would just even overpower like any trains in the area or cars. It also was super normal to just wake up and there'd be like frogs in your bedroom or in your bathroom. The area drew in a lot of younger families, young graduates, people that liked to get together and party a lot. Not what Kelly envisioned or his vibe, but Shane saw this as a great opportunity to have like the attention on her and be the hostess with the mostest, you know, hosting these parties like her family used to do, but like now it's happening in apartment building instead of a mansion. So Kelly adapted, he loved Shane, and they just became known as kind of like the party house. Shane definitely craved attention, specifically from men. The longer she was in her relationship with Kelly, the more she resented him. And poor Kelly just is constantly doing what he needs to try to make her happy. It seemed like the more he tried, the angrier she got. Nothing he did seemed to be good enough. She started having affairs with other women's husbands in the complex. And when newly single guys moved into the apartment, she was like the first one just like ready to, ease those divorce or breakup woes. She would tell her husband she was going out to the store and then just like sneak in these guys' windows. One guy in particular named Walt, she got quite close with, and they would confide in each other. He would talk to Shane about his frustration with his ex-wife and how difficult she was making it for him to see his children. And so one day Shane just casually asks, like, well, if you could kill her, would you? Initially, he's like, well, probably. She's just the worst. And then she gets like really engaged in the conversation. She's like, well, we'd have to find a way where you just couldn't trace it back to you at all. It'd have to look like an accident. And then she starts wondering if there's like a poison out there that can't be detected if an autopsy was performed. Then she leads into that she's tired of Kelly constantly asking where she's going, why she's racking up more credit card debt, always keeping tabs on her. The nerve. So she asks her lover if she can get her hands on something like this, would he be willing to go halvesies on it? So, he could take out his wife or ex-wife and she could take out Kelly. And as he sees like, okay, she's not really joking and just like fantasizing here, he's like, no, I wouldn't actually do it. And then she lets it go. So he just kind of like brushes it off like maybe she was just being super dramatic. Now around this time, her sister Kim moves into the building. She finds a suite that has an extra bedroom in it and she doesn't need that second room. So her goal is to find a roommate to sublet it to. She ends up finding one, but the deal falls through. This guy decides that he's actually not gonna leave the place he's at, but he says, hey, I have a friend who's looking for a place. If you're willing to meet him and it all works out, he'll just take this room instead of me and then you don't have to worry about trying to find somebody else. Kim agrees to meet with him, and he is a gentleman named Brett Ray. He was formerly in the nervy? Why am I like this? Nervy. He was formerly in the Navy and served in the Gulf War. When he moved into Kim's place, though, he was just starting a job at a local tire shop as a mechanic. He had just recently left a job working at a newspaper, though. Turns out, Brett was the son of Rick Ray, the guy who was writing all the articles about the Mills family and that Shane accused of ruining her family's reputation. Brett was known as a rebel, and when he was growing up, he was known to have, several encounters with the law. Eventually, it got to the point where it was becoming so consistent that his family was like, we're done bailing you out right now, so you just gotta like ship up or ship out, which he really actually did. He joined the Navy. Good one, Sherrilyn. He was proud of what he was doing. He saw it as a positive change in his life and something that his parents were now proud of him for. But it all came crashing down pretty much as soon as it started to take off. He was climbing the ranks when he ended up getting in a physical altercation with one of the chief officers on his ship. I guess one afternoon, Brett was reading a magazine and just like chilling, not doing work. This guy came in and said, hey, you shouldn't just be lollygagging around here, get up and do something. They, exchanged words. Punches were thrown, so he had to leave. He married a woman for less than a year and went to work at the newspaper that his dad was working at, but that also didn't last long. After that, he temporarily got a job at Mountain Press, which is where his dad was previously working, but he was let go when employees noticed that like office supplies, not even just like office supplies, but like big ticket items within the office were going missing. And then when a coworker of his came to work with bruises on her body and said that they came from Brett, he was fired. That's how he ended up at the tire shop and around the time that he moves into Kim's spare bedroom. The day he moves in, he sees Kelly tinkering around his Jeep and he goes over to see if he needs a hand. And right from that moment, they kind of became buddies. Brett was now always invited to the lavish drinking nights. And pretty much immediately, Shane sets her eyes on him and they begin having an affair as well. The two of them were quite similar and would actually be better suited for each other than Kelly, who was a great guy. Brett, like Shane, wanted the finer things in life but didn't want to work hard for it, so they would basically do anything they could to just make a buck and get things that they felt they were entitled to. It got to the point where the more he would come around, the more Shane and Kelly's friends would say to Kelly how uncomfortable they were, that she was just so obviously flirting with him and that it was clear something was going on, and she wasn't even showing him like the respect to do it behind his back, like, or, you know, behind the kids' backs. Like, it was in front of everybody to see. They would tell Kelly, you know, you shouldn't tolerate this. You're checked out of this lifestyle anyways. This is not what you want in life. Like, just leave her. But he didn't want to because he was scared that he wasn't going to be able to see the kids every day. It's always so devastating when you hear about cases like this because there's a decision that's made to stay in a tough spot just because they're scared of not seeing their kids or being active in their life. And then they find themselves in a situation where they can never have either ever again. On November 6, 1994, this is exactly what happens when hikers find Kelly's Jeep crashed into a tree off the side of Smoky Mountain. First impression, he drove off the side of the embankment and crashed into the tree. But when investigators got there, no one was in the driver's seat. They found Kelly in the back of the Jeep, which, I mean, possibly could happen. He could have been like tossed and tumbled throughout. But it didn't fit the evidence within the Jeep because if he's being thrown about this vehicle, there would be like evidence as far as like some form of blood pattern. But the only blood that was in the vehicle was actually blood that was pooled and kind of like almost flowing out the back of the tailgate of the Jeep, which could have again made sense if the Jeep was facing on a angle this way, but it wasn't. It was like this. The front of the Jeep was in a tree and the back end was up. So there would have been no way for the blood to pool up and out. It would have come down to the front of the Jeep. The police go to notify Shane and she is completely shocked, devastated. They run through the prior day with her and they find out that on the 5th of November, the family had gone to Chuck E. Cheese. After Chuck E. Cheese, they headed back to their apartment because they were hosting a barbecue for the neighborhood. The huge. This one, I guess, gathered quite a crowd, though, because they were doing it almost like a barbecue cook-off style. So everyone was having a good time, listening to tunes, getting drunk, barbecuing, smoking the devil's lettuce. And then I guess around midnight, the group disperses into two separate groups. One of them goes to one of the neighbors' houses and plays darts, and then the other stays at the Lovis house and they play poker. Guests said that everybody at the house was drinking quite heavily, and around 2 a.m., Kelly, who was quite intoxicated, decided he was just going to lay down on the couch in the living room. He passes right out, and guests start to trickle out. Around 3 a.m., Shane, Brett, and some other neighbors go to a 24-hour burger joint, and then the friends drop them back off at Shane's house around 4 a.m. When they come back, Shane says Kelly's awake and he's livid and accusing the two of them of having an affair behind his back. She says they got in a really heated argument, and around 4:30 in the morning, he ups and leaves the apartment, gets in his Jeep, and drives away. Shane says that was the last time she saw him and that all morning she had been calling neighbors looking for him. Since Shane said she's with Brett, he's the next guy the police want to talk to. Before they even get the chance, though, Brett's friend goes to the police and says Brett called him that morning at 7 a.m. and said that he needed a ride because he was stranded near the mountain. When he gets there, he sees Brett. He's got mud all over his pants. He's on edge. He's a swearing mess. And he's like, bro, what the hell happened to you? Brett just gets in the car, slams the door, and he's like, I just pushed Kelly's Jeep off the side of the road. He then tells them he initially hit him at the apartment with a baseball bat, killed him after one shot, put him in his Jeep, and pushed him off the embankment so that it would look like an accident. The friend said that allegedly Shane had told Brett about her disgust about her husband and said he had a decent life insurance that she was willing to split with Brett if he would do this. To him, he just saw that it was an easy way of making money and worth the risk of getting caught because he thought this plan was foolproof. And like word vomit, he doesn't hold anything back from his friend, not only telling him like what he had just done, but he even says that he tried to kill Kelly previously and that he had cut a hole on Kelly's brake hose in his Jeep. Turns out Kelly actually survived an incident where his brakes weren't working and he just went into the ditch. And what's so sad is he went to Brett after that incident and told him what happened and wanted him to look over his Jeep because he knew he was a mechanic and saw him as a friend. Before investigators even get a chance to get to Brett, he goes to work and starts telling another friend about what happened. Just zero reservations about like just maybe not bragging about a murder. And just so heartless. Like, Brett was a guy that Kelly did things with. They would go to the shooting range together. One time they took a road trip to Myrtle Beach, just the two of them. And Brett told people that Kelly was a good guy, but that money just meant more. Shane too, she's just the absolute worst. As friends were coming to console her after hearing about Kelly, she's like, yeah, it's sad, but you know, at least he was such a good guy. He left a lot of insurance for us. Ew. After the autopsy was done, the medical examiner was like, this is a joke, right? Like, he did not die in an accident. First of all, the injuries that are on the back of his head don't fit anything that happened within the Jeep, and don't even get me started on the bud pooling. So that night, police arrest Brett. He calls his parents to tell them he's being charged with murder. And since his dad was well known at the paper, he had connections around town for a high-profile lawyer. His parents wanted him to work out a deal where he was willing to cooperate to provide information that would lead to a first-degree murder charge against Shane, and then in return, hopefully show him some leniency. But he refused. He did not want to implicate Shane in any way. Brett's version of events was that he had heard Shane and Kelly arguing when they came back from the burgers. He heard Kelly leave the apartment and just fly away in his Jeep. And so he decided he was going to come over, check on Shane, and make sure she was okay. He said the door to the apartment was unlocked and Shane wasn't answering when he knocked. So he just lets himself in, sees Shane asleep in her bedroom, and he was like walking in and just like, you know, just lightly just grabbing her foot, watching her just sleep so peacefully. And then he says that Kelly comes into the apartment and he's like, whoa, like, what are you doing? I told you, I knew something was up with you guys. And he's telling him like, no, nothing's going on. I just came in to check on her. They get in this verbal argument. Kelly punches Brett, knocks him to the ground. Then Brett says he sees Kelly go towards his gun cabinet, and he just like reaches around the ground and finds his son's baseball bat, picks it up, and just hits Kelly in the back of the head, and one shot, he's gone. Throughout all of this, he said Shane and the kids stayed asleep, didn't hear any of the commotion. He drags Kelly to the Jeep, cleans up the apartment, and then just drives the Jeep off a cliff. The problem with this story is that nobody believed he could have done this by himself. Kelly was about a foot taller than Brett and about 100 pounds of muscle heavier than him. So then Brett changes his story and tells them that the neighbor that Shane had previously had an affair with and that Brett was jealous of was the one that came over and helped him. So police go over there, toss the handcuffs on him, question him, and he's like, whoa, no, I was not involved. He told them that it had been quite some time that he had distanced himself from Shane actually, and they were no longer having an affair, but that he knew Brett didn't like him. He also tells them that it's probably Shane that's involved because they had once had a conversation about this poison that she wanted to go like halvesies on together. So just based on his demeanor and his story, police believe him and they let him go. The police go back to Shane and they say they want to question her again, but really they want to find a reason to have a warrant and go back in the house. And I guess the second time they question her, she's really annoyed that they're there. They do ask her if she was having an affair with Brett, which she denies. And she tells them she was actually scared of him and that he's obsessed with her. She's not really giving them much, and they're kind of feeling like their time is running out and they're not seeing anything that's going to give them reason to get this warrant. So as they're leaving the apartment, one of the detectives looks over and he sees Kelly's diploma hanging on the wall, and there's this splatter of blood on it. So it's like the evidence that they need on Kelly's diploma. Very spooky. That's how Ariana says spooky. Spooky. And that was all they needed. So they're able to get a warrant and they bring in luminol to do a test. When they start spraying it, like we mentioned in the West Memphis 3 case, the place lights up like a Christmas tree. That's the phrase. Always. But seriously, the whole apartment is like fluorescent. They see this big pool of blood on the couch where Kelly was sleeping. So it looks like that's actually where he was attacked and not headed towards a gun cabinet. And then they see drag marks through the hallway and it leads to the back door of the suite. And the sad thing about this is he would have actually had to been dragged between the children's beds to get out. Surprisingly, Shane's not arrested right away. She hires a lawyer who won't let police talk to her anymore. And they're trying to spin the story that this was all Brett and that he did this because he was so obsessed. He was trying to take her husband out so that he could be the only man in her life. She does stay out of jail, but only for a few weeks, and then she's arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During the trials, Brett never pointed a finger at Shane. He maintained always that he was the one and only killer. There was no planning, and she had no idea of his intentions. His family looks at her, though, like this man-eater, this black widow with this control and sex appeal that was able to manipulate their son into doing this. Even though Brett never did throw Shane under the bus and she never admitted any guilt, they were both found guilty and sentenced to 25 years with the possibility of parole. As of this year, 2021, they've almost served that full sentence, and I think it's like 3 years that they're eligible for parole. Definitely two people that I wouldn't like seeing walking amongst us. You'll have to let me know what you guys think. I mean, I think she's as guilty as they come, even though she's never admitted it, and neither has Brett. But she's just, you could just tell, like, by hearing about her and the stories, like, she's just brutal. One story that I read that made me feel like she was really, like, one of the most heartless people I've read about was that right after his ashes were released, instead of saving them for her children or giving them to his parents, she takes the urn and goes to the cliff where he died, and she just throws his ashes over. Just threw them away like they were nothing. I also really want to know more about Shane's stepfather's suicide. There's stuff that just did not add up there. I don't think that Shane and her mom had anything to do with it because he was their bread and butter, but I do think that his like right-hand man at the bank, Dwayne, I think there's something up there. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but right now my spidey senses, they're all just like jacked up on there's more to it. Oh, and yeah, one more thing to add to that is, I don't know how I forgot it. When he was found with a revolver in his left hand and he was right-handed. So, something happened. Pretty sure. Alright, that's it for me today, you guys. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with me. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. You know I love and I appreciate you so much. I will see you in the next video and I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.